All right, guys. So jumping again into Longsword today. So any kind of two-handed, hand and a half sword, anything like that. Today we're going to start diving into probably the easiest thing to talk about now is getting into some of the master strikes. So the master strikes are built up basically off the fundamentals. So it's kind of tricky getting into them this early, but they're important to know because they give you a lot of fundamentals and background information to dive into. But realistically, they're things that kind of come up later and are going to help us talk about a lot of concepts that tie into fighting and good basic fighting and things like that. So even if you don't fully understand these techniques, how to apply them, how to use them, they cover a lot of ground, a lot of basics that exploit so-called common fencing. So good common fencing is being athletic, being fast, having good control of distance, being able to recognize, measure very well. Any kind of person who trains in Olympic fencing comes over to does HEMA, that's going to be doing common fencing. Really good, really strong strikes, really fast, effective strikes, great distance control, great athleticism, but they're not doing these tricky things that come out of these strikes. And being able to exploit these ideas are what kind of separates the common fencer, the peasant fencer, anything you want to think about like that, from the masters. So these are good for exploring those principles as well as getting into kind of the deeper understanding of the Lichtenauer tradition. So the first one I'm talking about today is the Zornhau, or the Wrath Strike. And at its core, it kind of comes out as, and it's called the Wrath Strike, it's the peasant strike. And it's hard to describe from basics, but it starts breaking those rules of good fencing we've talked about before. So good fencing involves kind of stepping offline, keeping our arms straight, working in structure, striking to the opponent and not their blade, and things like that. And once you're a master, once you're good at understand these foundational rules, you're able to start breaking them, and that's kind of where the master strikes come into play. Another interpretation I have is that while all actions kind of take one tempo to complete, the master strikes tend to do things in 1.5 tempo. So it's kind of setting aside and attacking, not in the same motion, but faster than it takes to do it in 2 motions. So it's kind of in that in-between stage. So working for the Wrath Strike, the Peasant Strike, the Zornhau, we're again starting to break some of these rules and break some of these things. And a lot of this comes down to applying physics, applying ideas of structure, taking away structure from the other person, and doing them in the fight. The easiest way that I've found to get people to understand the how of the Zornhau, maybe not the exact thing, but the growth motions and the why of it works, is pulling out of Meyer a little bit. So Meyer has a position that people kind of laugh at, and it's called Zornhut, or Wrath Guard. And if I'm fighting the Pell, I face forward, I turn on the balls of my feet, turning away from the enemy, and bring the sword over my shoulder like this. And obviously this is queuing up, telegraphing a very big, very messy, very powerful strike. Very rarely, if ever, does Meyer talk about going from here and delivering this kind of motion. And it's not to say you can't do that or even that you shouldn't do that, but that's the move that everyone's expecting. That's the move that everyone kind of intuitively knows. Like, oh, I go from here and I come across the big haymaker of a swing and the other person's in 2 pieces on the ground. So everyone understands that concept. One of my favorite applications of this guard, of this stance, is I'll come here, I'll telegraph this big angry motion. I might even do it from a step or 2 away. So I'll step into this and really look like I'm going to just tear someone's head off. And then I'll just kind of come out like this. And the other person has swung wildly at my sword, leaving the center of this fight open, and I can just kind of politely tap them like that, and we move on with our lives. But this position, and again, I'll face the camera so we can see a little bit better. I'm here, I'm going to turn all the way around like I'm winding up and setting something through. So the way I teach the Zornhau, which is vastly different than many, probably most other HEMA schools, is kind of working from this position. And I'm going to turn back the square using my hips to rotate. I'm just going to kind of flip my sword over my shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Right, so I'm here, I've turned, I kind of push down. Notice I'm pushing down to nice straight arms, nice structure, nice body position from here, but I'm not extended. Right, so again, I'm here, I'm going to turn, I'm just going to throw the sword straight down, just like this. So I'm not coming out with a long cut. I'm not doing these other things I've talked about. Sure, I might step through later afterward, but the goal of this action-reaction setup isn't to throw a cut to fight for the center. It isn't to kind of hit, definitely not to hit the other person, because I'm shortening my range. But instead, all I'm going to do is get to the center first and take control of it, and hopefully set myself up for a thrust. So that's a lot of weird things. I'll try to unpack them in the next 10 minutes and make sense of things. But again, this idea is here. I'm turning back square, and instead of casting this out, looking like I'm going to cut someone in half and destroy them, I'm really thinking about now just pressing down, extending down, finding that structure at the base here, but I'm not looking for a cut. I'm just looking to place this in front of me as hard, as quick, as fast, as strong as I can. Then once it's there, I'm going to step through. So we'll see if my PEL holds up. The base is a little loose here. What this starts to do is if this cut's coming at this angle, when I turn around and drop this, I'm going to take the center with my edge, and if I'm lucky and I get what I'm looking for, I'm going to come over the top of their sword and displace it down and away as I lock out. And even if I step through, I'm not in range to hit, even if their sword is past me, which this spell doesn't demonstrate very well. And I can drive through with control, with safety behind that motion. So again, I'm here, I'm turning, I'm dropping this down and coming up. So facing front, all we're looking for from this, turn, I'm going to drop, and then I'm pressing through. So now that you kind of have that gross motion of I'm here and I just kind of throw this down off the ground and don't let it hit and walk through, we're going to kind of take that idea, simplify it a little bit, neaten it up, make it pretty, make it useful across multiple options. So it's not this big wind up here, but instead we're just going to work from our shoulder, from that shoulder Vontag we had before. This is much harder to do from above, which is that you can't just pull this straight down. But again, it gets really slow. It gets tedious to travel the distance, keep yourself safe. And this is the position most people wind up fighting from anyway, because it's faster, because it's easier, and you only go up here if you want to scare somebody, which does work. So from here, all I'm doing, I'm trying to find that same end position we had from this. So instead of worrying about starting here, turning our hips and dropping this down, reality says we can just go from here and throw this down in front of us and walk through after and extend if we need to. So just really working on getting this nice starting position and pressing it down and moving through. And if you want to have some extra fun with this and start working this through other interpretations, other things, you can even throw this up high and pull it straight down. Right, so now we're starting to blur this line between what am I actually doing. I start all of my cuts moving up here like this, and I can pull down here anyway. You're going to be able to do a lot more, a lot easier, because you have a later decision point than from your shoulder. Something we can talk about much more later after you go through all the master strikes. Something I like to do is I get used to throwing everything up here. But this one, this is a reaction. This is, I've messed up. I don't say I'm on my heel, but the other person struck first. I'm going to throw this out in front of me as quick as I can, get to this low structure point as quick as I can, so I can drive through and control. So important notes, important things about this. What makes this special? So I already talked about this being a shorter cut. I'm not going through this extension and pulling through anymore. I'm dropping this and putting this here. Kind of highlight, we'll ignore this sword for now. If I throw my normal cut and I pull through and I'm hitting the PEL at the right range, when I throw a Zornhau, even at that step, I'm still not striking the target. What this does is it gives me the center and lets my point stay useful. Whereas my opponent has thrown a long cut, most likely, I've deflected their blade off to the side, and I'm here in front of them with my sword. Well, their sword is far less intimidating because the point's past me. It can no longer stab me. Yes, I've got to be concerned about a slice, maybe a cut if they have time to wind up again, but this is such a fast action, it's not something I'm really going to worry about in that moment. So again, the idea behind this cut, why it makes it a master strike, why it starts breaking those rules is my normal cut would come out and strike my target. When I do a Zornhau, it's short, it's quick, it comes across, and my point is online, ready to thrust. So that leads to the follow-up for the Zornhau is once you've thrown it, I'm not looking to strike with it, I'm looking to displace with my sword, I'm looking to come through and thrust immediately after. So if we're taking this idea of always walking through our motions and not getting used to stopping here, like it's a big cut and we're finishing something, is I can throw this and I'm immediately walking through and I don't even do anything with my hands. If I need to raise up to cover, great. If I want to just extend forward, I can. But the idea becomes it's very direct here. And I'm immediately walking this through into my target, keeping myself safe, keeping myself covered. So getting a little bit more into what I think is the interesting stuff of how the binds react, right? So I mentioned that this starts to work because I'm kind of cheating the bind. My opponent is expecting me to cut into the sword like this. We have a nice 45-degree or so angle on the strikes, but instead I'm coming in vertically, roughly that same angle, but this shortened grip is going to kind of pull my edge down over their flat and displace it much stronger than it's going to if I had edge to edge. I think I talked about this in DUSAC just on Wednesday, but if you look at a sword as a steel beam, you either have a diving board when you hit the flat, or you have a balance beam or an I-beam when you come up on the edge. If you can use your edge to hit their flat, even by a small degree, you're going to have a lot more presence, a lot more control in the bind, and that's where things start benefiting you and hurting your opponent. And that's where all these master strikes start coming in, is you're displacing the bind in weird ways that the common fencer isn't used to. And the reason this isn't as amazing, exciting in HEMA as it was in the 1400s is because this is how everyone fences, right? Basically, the current meta is everyone's doing German longsword from Lichtenau or Meyer. We all have the same tools and tricks up our sleeve. So there's no great secret that everyone has the same secret, so now it's common knowledge. So because of that, these aren't as exciting and fanciful as they probably were at the time, right? But if you randomly are traveling on the road and you get into a sword fight, and you start doing these techniques, the person you're fighting against is going to have no idea what's going on and why their sword isn't doing the right thing, because they're in the world of, I just throw these long cuts and have motion and be really quick and fast and agile, and that'll win you a lot of fights. But being able to incorporate these master strikes, being able to manipulate the bind, controlling the bind and working from there is what's going to start setting your fencing out and above from normal common fencers. So kind of again, to briefly summarize the Zornhau, what we're looking at, this is the secret of center control, right? To basically say that if there's a line drawn between your opponent and yourself fighting, you want to be on that line and controlling it before your opponent can. The Zornhau, even though you're acting second, is how you get control of that. Obviously, in German longsword, they say, take the vor, go first, throw the first cut, throw the second cut after that, and just keep going, and eventually your opponent will be stuck parrying all your attacks, and eventually will get hit. It's that magic missile versus Jedi analogy. Eventually the Jedi gets tired. If I just keep swinging and striking, and no matter what I do, my opponent is parrying, eventually their parry is going to get sloppy, it's going to get late, and I'm going to come through and make my strike. So Zornhau is, oh crap, I messed up. They went first. I can fix that by not worrying about striking with my first action, but instead taking the center, fighting at the center, getting that control, and by virtue of this, their sword can no longer threaten me. My sword, my point is still in line, so I can easily walk this in, thrust this in, whatever else I need to do before they can engage and before they can attack. So like I was saying before, that these master strikes are kind of 1.5 tempos. Like I haven't hit with this first cut Instead, I've worked to control the center, and because my point is still in front of them and their point is past my face, I can just thrust through and not worry about it. Whereas if I throw this long cut, now even if I'm swinging at them and doing the right things and parrying, they're going to have the first opportunity to react to my cut because they've cut first, which means my next cut has been covering line and covering their next attack, and so on and so forth, until either they mess up and don't cut fast enough, or I mess up and get hit. So Zornhau, the first master strike is taking the center line, shortening your cut. That's doing some other tricky things about physics, which honestly isn't worth talking about unless you're taking rapier classes, which feel free to ask me about that later. All I really care about is cuts coming in. I've messed up. I'm using my Zornhau to take the center before they get there. And now I can thrust out and control and move through before they can react. So again, drop your point, thrust out. So with a target, I drop and thrust through. And it's really that simple. You can start getting super finicky and detailing about like, okay, Meyer says that the wrath line is a 45-degree line, and you're kind of coming over the top more. Should you be coming out like this? Absolutely go ahead and do it. It really doesn't matter at the heart of it. My kind of brushed off answer is Meyer wrote a book to give you and walk away, whereas the early KDF instructors were very much, this is how you do things, this is what works, this is why it works, this is how you can do it. And they kind of taught concepts and ideas that kind of let them explain themselves. So sure, if you want to bring this wrath cut here and travel that 45-degree arc, that's great. And honestly, that may even be better. You might get over their blade more, you might overbind a little bit better, you might have a better bind results more often than not. But the goal, the principle of the Zornhau is that you want to get to the center first, you want to control that center with structure, you want to keep your tip back so you can stab later, right? I'm not throwing a long cut because this puts me in the knock and doesn't let me hit anything. By dropping this cut in short, I get to structure sooner. I have the center faster. I get to the center before they get to the center. This lets me thrust through before they can react. So I hope that's useful. I hope that's insightful. If there are questions or comments on this, I'm definitely willing to talk about them. As I said, this is kind of the weirder stuff that most other HEMA schools don't get into the same way we do. So I'm definitely happy to discuss the variations, what you guys have learned, or if you think this is dumb, let me know, and I'd be happy to discuss why I'm wrong. So until then, I will be back on Monday with more Sword and Buckler. Have a good weekend.